What's cooking, folks? Vermillion Phoenix here, and today we're jumping into some more Orcs Must Die Unchained. This time we're heading into the baths, and what we should know by now is that probably means we're starting a new character. So, with the poll that I ran when I was finishing up Brass and Elin's runs, completed, or at least got to where it is now, the character that came out ahead was actually Temper. So that's who we're going to be starting this with now. What I'm going to try to do is I want to get these out a lot faster than I did before, rather than doing like maybe one of each character alternating. What I want to try to do is double them up, but I am not going to hold myself to that steadfast right now just because I'm battling a lot of other things. So if I'm able to do that, that'll be great, but just know that I want to get these out much quicker for you guys, that you can get a more overall grasp of what the character does, and also because I want to be able to sort of speed through some of the games that I'm going to be doing in addition to putting up the orc stuff. And that's just, you know, something I want to do personally. But you don't need to do anything too crazy on this particular map. There's not too many places that have really amazing spots for you, and playing Temper, you are kind of in some very interesting positions as far as what you can place where. However, I want to place some new traps, or at least some traps that I don't use too often. So, I want to use the arrow wall. What else can we use? I think that's pretty solid. Why don't we place the web spinner over here and then grab a second ballista that works. Okay, yeah, that'll be it. Yep, that'll be it. Drop feeling fierce because we are not going to be ranged and we might take a bit of damage. Has a trap fetish is actually pretty solid. Temper doesn't have a ton of health, but it's a good amount. It's not particularly low. Though some people think it could be higher. I don't know exactly why, but it seems pretty solid to me. Now, Temper uses Rage for his energy mechanic, or his resource. Resource is probably the best term to use for that. And it has a discount when using any sort of any gear that eats mana. It also fuels his skills, so that's important too. But let me see if I probably won't need this. Let's go for high pain tolerance. Let's see if I can go through just some of the basics of how his rage works, and we'll see if you guys can kind of understand it from there. We'll be using it a lot as we go forward, and there's a lot of interesting nuances with it, I think. But here we go. All right.
The sooner we get started, the sooner this is over with.
So, since this is the first in a full run for Temper, I should actually just take the time to go over his actual skills. And you'll notice that he has a good amount of interesting stuff. He's one of the few characters that has 5 active abilities and a passive. His passive is basically just his resource. And the fact that he can have his resource erupt or explode when it maxes out, giving him some very big damage and then a large AoE knockback, which is actually pretty solid. Happy Place is his Q ability, and he can use this to both increase his movement speed as well as restore his HP. It's also a key tool in controlling the amount of rage you have, because normally once your rage builds up, it just automatically explodes, and if you don't spend it, it will fill up. If you're out of combat for a certain period of time, eventually it will start to deplete. But controlling it again is key to actually understanding how you sort of weave in and out of combat with Temper without sort of either stranding yourself or getting stuck in some sort of animation that you don't want. Then we have Hammer Slam. Hammer Slam is probably my favorite ability of Temper's. It's pretty strong, hits in a good AoE. It's not super huge, but for the damage, it doesn't need to be. But it also creates a small bit of fire burns all the enemies that you hit it with, so they take a bit of extra damage. But the initial impact is really what you want if you're going for damage there. Then we have Bull Charge. Bull Charge has him basically hit all the enemies for a good length in front of him. I think it's about 3 or 4 tiles with a bit of damage and a good amount of knockback. Then we have his primary, Swing, Punch, Smash. That's actually the order that it's done in. I can pull this back up, but
Sorry for you now.
so I guess it's more like jab, swing, uppercut. But yeah, he has a 3-hit attack that decreases his speed as he starts to swing. The first 2 hits, well, the first hit isn't too much, but you lose about half your movement speed while it's happening. When the second swing comes out, you're stuck in that same slowness, and when the last hit comes out, you basically are forced to be stationary for just a moment. A lot of characters, when Temper was first released, were asking for a similar style of movement with all the characters, and I think this makes Temper sort of unique, and I don't really want it to happen with everybody, but if they were to do something similar, just with changing the specific movement speed and maybe giving them some other effects on their attacks, that would be pretty cool. But as it is right now, I think just having all of the other characters, except for Bianca, be able to move while melee attacking without a forced 100% movement penalty, it actually feels pretty nice that way. But then we have his Exploding Hammer. His Exploding Hammer is interesting because unlike most of his other abilities that require Rage, Exploding Hammer can use Rage, but it uses Rage only if you have it, and it makes the hammer more powerful. So normally you can just chuck the hammer, it blows up, gets a bit of knockback. It's one of the few true explosions in the game where even if you do not hit an enemy with it, the explosion from the hammer still takes place. Whereas with a character like, say, Max and his In Your Faces, if you don't hit a target initially with the arrows, they do not actually explode and trigger damage to anything else. So it was nice to see that when it was implemented. You guys may notice some of that when you actually see me playing with them. But because I took Overachiever, we can actually take a look at his first tier upgrades before I have to run into combat too. So Anger Loves Company is interesting because it increases the number of enemies aggroed while Temper is exploding in rage. That's interesting only because that period of time isn't particularly long and you deal a lot of damage while in it. It also attracts more enemies to you to be dealt damage by the explosion. However, you also have the option for Seeing Red, which gives his Bull Rush 2-second stun for heavy minions. Now, because light minions are automatically flung, that basically turns Bull Rush into a semi-solid crowd control ability for Temper, and having it early is actually quite powerful. So more often than not, you'll probably see me picking Seeing Red. Moment of Zen is okay, but really if you have the mobility to sort of get out of the way, you're really not going to be worried too much about not aggroing enemies. I mean, it could be something that you want if you're playing a particularly difficult map and enemies are one-shotting you, but overall don't think that's really going to be an issue.
Like this here spot. Watch out for this! Gotta do something to keep them out.
Howdy, y'all.
Now, I probably shouldn't be using the Priest for anything other than his damage, because with Temper having Rage as his mechanic rather than actual mana, you can't actually regenerate it with any of the game's mechanics. It has to be generated through Temper's combat, or his primary attacks, and that's the only way to get it. That said, I believe it has about a 50% cost reduction on gear use. It's either 50 or 60%. But let's go ahead and get this started. Gonna take Seeing Red. Shouldn't really need it, but just to be safe.
Enemy has opened a minion portal.
Wow, this is already 10 minutes long, and this is a 14-minute map. Jumping when under the effects of the chicken chaser are pretty good.
Broken through a gate.
Alright, so here's the slam. Oh, nope, don't have damage. Now here it is. So, boom. That's a lot of damage. And you can see the ground's on fire for a bit. Doesn't stay on fire long, and comparably the damage from the fire is super weak. I mean, over time it probably will do about maybe a quarter of what the slam does, but gives you the opportunity to hit a few enemies behind temper, or behind the enemies that are near you. Is that right? No, I'm sorry. You use 20% of the default cost when using his rage to fuel things. That's pretty powerful. Or at least I think it's pretty powerful. Then you have things like... No, that costs 20. Okay. So I was wrong, it's 40. It should be the same conversion as brass. However, you can see the rage ticking down. The next set of weavers for that is actually where the important stuff is. So you get a lot of interesting choices at tier 2 with temper, and it's good that the weavers come at a slightly earlier level than I think when it was first released, at tier 4 instead of 5. But what we get here is the ability to really decide more about how we like to use temper. Now, I haven't used Happy Place a lot, but basically what Happy Place is going to do is you burn a little bit of rage, you move a bit quicker, and your HP regenerates. Now, it's not going to make a big deal here, but it is pretty important overall. You double the speed bonus, and its default speed bonus doesn't even tell you. Nope, I think it's about 30%. Could be wrong. But it is a little useful in moving from place to place, especially... I can try to do it now. And the combination of moving more... Oh, did not need to throw that hammer. The combination of movement speed and health regen is pretty powerful. But my favorite is always going to be Rage Machine. Lowest Top is interesting. It was a weaver that was sort of underpicked, so they retooled it, and he gets an additional 20% of his rage preserved whenever he does his explosion.
This will protect our rift. The spot looks mighty fine. Let the trap do the killing. Well, I don't have to. Can't everyone just be trained?
Alright, all out now. Lowest Top is actually pretty good, but it pales in comparison to Rage Machine, mainly because Rage Machine... Yeah, there we go. All that good healing. Rage Machine lets you keep the rage that you earn. And because his rage can only be earned through combat, this lets you basically store power for special attacks. It turns it into mana, but with the decreased cost on gear and just the kit that Temper has overall, with a good amount of knockbacks, some stuns, all that good stuff, it makes it really powerful. And the fact that the explosions are stupid strong, it's really nice in that way as well. So what you'll notice when you're playing Temper is that as your rage builds up, when you hit an enemy, you'll notice that he sort of glows. And there's one of the good old hammer tosses. That glow corresponds to the amount of rage that you've built up so far. And I believe it upgrades itself in about 50 rage increments. I think there's 5 stages, with 4 or 5. But let me see if I can empty this real quick. Just twinkle twinkle. Hit him with the bull rush. You can actually set up a situation where you can bull rush most of the enemies in this stage just off of it completely, and there's almost nothing they can do about it. Now you'll notice that you can build his rage up pretty freaking fast. And then we have the tier 3 weavers. These are all pretty nice. Set off is probably one of the most powerful ones. All of the ground traps that you have nearby trigger. It won't work too well with things like fire traps because having them trigger more than once on the same enemy, not really too crazy, but still pretty solid on just about everything. Although I still have to test the interactions with charge-based traps. I don't think it recharges them. I think it just forces them to fire once on whatever is there. So that may not be too ridiculous. It's definitely no Gabby's kinetic pulse, but since it's just a refire weaver, probably shouldn't be quite that powerful. But that means that Gabby's still probably the only character with trap charge synergy, so to speak. But then you have Kicking Mad, which makes Bull Rush knock enemies back super far, and Hammered, which triples the damage of the exploding hammer, I'm sorry. So I'm gonna grab Hammered real quick, and yeah, that's you're not gonna be dealing with like max level, like in your face's damage after his damage buff. Oh, and this is the explosion. Now, I'll talk more about the explosion later because I probably won't be using it too often here, but it is going to be a pretty significant part of Temper's toolkit.
Trap, there, trap, everywhere, trap, trap. Gotta keep the rip safe. I hope no one gets hurt.
Okay, so there's a couple things that I could have been doing here a while ago so that I don't have to worry about it later. Let me get that done.
I'll just leave it here. There, trap, there, trap,
Alright, that's all done. So, back to Temper himself. Oh. You can see that that did a lot less damage there. That was, again, specifically based on the amount of rage that you have there. The more rage you have, the stronger it gets. And that was still triple the damage. It normally would only do about 100. So under 50 rage. But no, that's still quite a bit. Alright, we're not going to build up too much now. So, you hit an enemy with below 50 rage. The only thing you get is the symbol on the back of Temper lighting up. Now, I'm at 50 rage. Looks like we still just get this lighting up. Oh no, alright, so it looks to be at 100. I think it's 100, then 200. Under 100 gets you the first level. You just get the symbol lighting up. When you get to the second level, you get, I think, a red glow on Temper. There we go.
An unstable rift is over. It must be destroyed.
Alright, just gonna head back here.
Well done.
Yeah, and above 100 is where you get the first damage increase for most of his abilities. Like that. I believe that did about 1,000 before. Now, even counting the battle levels, that's still a pretty large increase. Now, there we go again. I usually don't take Bull Rush deals double damage, Stomping Mad, just because I use Bull Rush more so for crowd control, not damage. Explosive Anger is, but I mean, you can use Bull Rush for damage. It's not, you know, impossible or doesn't make sense. As you can see, I'm dealing about 580 right there. Doubling the damage would have put that over 1,000. So it would have been in similar territory to Temper's other abilities, but not quite dealing as much damage as the Hammer Slam. Now let's trigger the explosion. Now, if you notice, if you hold mouse 1, Temper will continue to attack, and all of those attacks do increased damage. Each one of them will hit somewhere around as hard as the Hammer Slam, and they will hit multiple enemies that are nearby. So It's super powerful if you keep your enemies concentrated enough that you will actually hit them.
Unstable rift is opening. Destroy it.
Alright, so explosive anger increases the damage that you deal with those hits and with the explosion. Actually, I'm not even sure if it works with the hits. Let's go ahead and test that out now. I normally don't choose it, but I kind of want to see just what the buff is on that. Nope. I didn't even get to see the damage number. Okay. We'll have to do it again. You can't actually trigger Happy Place, I believe, until you have about 30 or 40 rage.
The boss minion has entered the battlefield. Not like fighting. Need more rage.
All right. And this is the last wave. Let's see if we can actually get this triggered. Oh, that's the grenades. Don't want to get killed trying to pull this off. All right, here we go. All right, so those don't seem to go up too much. That looked to be about 2,700 physical damage, and those guys have quite a bit of armor. So, yeah, that's probably some really serious damage. Nice to know it comes out as physical, though. And boom. They gave Temper a new dance. Right. Ooh, and I think one more map and I am going to be account level 100. It'll be nice to finally hit the limit. Do I have anything that I can upgrade right now? No, I do not. Okay. Which means it's probably time for me to start hitting the store deals. Actually, I guess I can drop some jibs in the chest. Really rather would use keys though. Okay, so next we're going to go into maximum security, and we'll be doing that with Temper 2. I'm going to try to just run through all of his videos within about the span of a week or two, and then we'll move on to the next character. I may also do some other stuff in between it, but we should be able to get to him a lot faster. I noticed that when I was doing Elin and Brass, it was taking quite some time, and a lot of people started asking for other heroes. So to make sure I get that stuff out quicker, I want to actually try to do that. But yeah, let me know what you think of Temper so far. I still have a few things to explain, which I'm going to try to cover in maximum security, and I think it'll make a lot more sense once I get in there, especially since you guys will see a bit more of it in action. And yeah, it should be pretty fun. But for now, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you appreciated that introduction, or at least enjoyed just seeing what it looks like. And until next time, as always, have a good one, folks.